Canterbury Trails Farm. Today we're going to be sewing a crocheted or tatted, whichever one you want to call it, yoke nightgown. These were very popular from about 1900 to 1930, and you saw a lot of advertisements for free yoke patterns were put in magazines, women's magazines, by the crochet thread companies, also by pattern companies, but mostly the crochet thread companies were promoting these patterns for these easy yokes. Some of them aren't so easy, some of them are very involved. And they were easily kimono styled dresses. And what do I mean by kimono style? I'm not meaning like a big Japanese kimono. Just a simple cut, square sleeves cut on out of the fabric. There's no inset sleeves, there's no seams that you're sewing. The sleeves are just one piece. In fact, basically the gown has two seams up the side, and not counting the hems and stuff. It's a really simple garment to make. And so these yokes were used on corset covers. They were used on shifts that went under the corsets, the chemises, camisoles. They were used on nightgowns primarily. So you have a lot of these patterns that were out there and a lot of pictures in women's crafting book. I'm going to show you a few of the yokes that I've gotten that are very pretty that we're going to be using. And you might see these at antique shops, and usually they're pretty cheap. They're usually about $5 and under because no one really knows what to do with them, because if you don't sew or you're not inclined to make a nightgown or something like that, they just sit around. So a lot of the women made a lot of these because they used a lot of corset covers, and a lot of them just didn't get used again after corsets started fading away in the 20s. And so they just sort of sat in drawers, and they're sort of like, once you wash them, I just soak mine. I put a very hot boiling water in a bowl and then drop in like a dishwasher tab and just soak them. Most of them are this ivory crocheted lace, and they come out really clean. You can just air dry them and just iron it. I mean, they're cotton crochet thread. So that's the first one. I needed some cotton gowns, so I started digging around in my stash to find out what I've got. Got another one here. It's just a square, simple square. This one now has sleeves, and this one is in a larger size, which is rather difficult to find because I have a bunch of them that I pulled out and it was really, really small. So this one has sleeves built into it. This part here will be sewn on the dress. So that's really neat. And you run ribbons to these necks to adjust the size. So that one's a neat one. This one has the sleeves. Alright, and the one of the fanciest ones I've got, this one's really pretty. Has the sleeve inset too with the underarms. And it's got the decorative pattern on both sides. Lots of times you find the decoration is more sparse on the back. Then I have super coolest one of all. It has the neck piece, which you'll run, like you run the ribbon to the top so it will gather up. And then it has two sleeve pieces. Let's look at magazine images from, these are all from around 1916. Well, let me show you. I have some that were too small. They were small. Well, that one would probably fit. Some of these are really tiny, and this blue one was really pretty. But these won't fit me, so I'm just going to hold on to these for whatever reason. And this one was, I was really excited about this one. It has like, you see it's like double, it's really intricate, but it did not fit. So most of these, it's like needlecraft. This is August 1916. And you have a lot of images of different colors and round yokes. Here's one of the style gown that we're going to be doing, the simple cut. This was an embroidery one, but it's the same. This is the cut of gown we'll be doing, putting the yokes on. And you see, like, here's a corset cover. It was a simple cut arm. It could be really square, or it could be rounded. And this was a 1915 home needlework magazine. So some of these, like I said, were advertisements by the crochet companies, crochet thread company, and you could send off. Sometimes you had to save your labels, and you could send off for these free yoke patterns. Some of these are like Modern Priscilla. They were just women's magazine. These are all the mid early 1900s. Here's a good example of what we're going to be doing. So you have the simple gown style there with the yoke on it. There's no inset of sleeves. It's just a cut on a fold. You have half, you just cut it very square, and you add your yoke, and then you cut away the inside as you hem it in, and we're going to be doing all of that. Came from this really pretty needlecraft cover. A really good example of one. This one has it was like the one piece with this more sleeves, and you're just like sort of attaching straight across. Here's another. There's an open. That's pretty modern style there today, even today. The open shoulder. Again, it was the crochet. It's a very pretty one. And that was another modern Priscilla. So all of these are like 1915, 1916 magazines and mostly needlecraft magazines. Okay, to start with, we want to find a size that's close to what we want for the gown. So I went in my husband's closet and I found a 2XL t-shirt. This is going to be different for everybody. I wear about an 8 to a 10 given the brand of clothing. So I want something that's bigger than me to cut for the gown. I tried this one on and it was just about perfect except for the seam allowances. So I'm going to give 2 inches for the seam allowances, 15 inches, just to give myself a little bit of extra room. I'm going to make it bigger on the top, so I'm going to have to take that in and sew it. It's going to make a fuller top. The other way I could compensate if I don't want a fuller top, I mean, I'm going to be gathering it, but like it's going to be more billowy coming off, if that makes sense. Not more straight like that picture that we looked at. So we're doing a half pattern because we folded the shirt in half. And I just have a piece of thin cardboard. I went ahead and measured my length. I'm 5'6", and I wanted to allow a couple inches for about an inch at the top for the shoulder seam. If there is one, there probably won't be because we're doing the yoke, but I just threw it in there anyway. And an inch at the bottom for the hem. So 48 inches is about where I came up with. Once I get the gown, the hem will be the last thing I put in, and if I don't like how the length, I can trim it then. So I'm going to place, I'm going to slide this under, trying to leave this on my cutting board. You don't have to use a cutting board, you could just be using a flat surface, that's fine. You just need to measure. This was just easy for me to get my measurements and stuff. So remember, it's not going to be for the length, this is just for the top part of it, the pattern. So these are just cardboard. You can buy them like at Walmart and craft stores and fabric stores. It just makes it easier, like I'm lining up. I know this is the 15-inch mark here, so I'm lining up this tail end of my t-shirt with that line, and I've backed my cardboard all the way to where I want it to be larger than what this t-shirt is. And now I'm just going to trace around it. Now remember, we're not tracing, around the sewn parts. We're just doing a square. So you might have to adjust. See, like this is turned in where it's been sewn. So I'm just making it square. I've cut where my neck is. So that's going to make my sleeve rather large. So now that I've got my measurements down here and here, I think I'm going to move this all the way up to where the sleeve would touch the shoulder. Now I'm going to come back up here and adjust my rectangle using the sleeve as a guide. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the sleeve might end up being bigger than I want. But I'm doing a test gown first. Find some fabric that maybe you're not really in love with to do a test gown. So, alright, let's take away the t-shirt. It might look a little big, but remember you're going to have, we will have seams in both sides, and there will be, when we get the yokes in, this is my test fabric. It's like a cotton, it's a vintage cotton, it's got some pink roses on it. And here's my yoke. We fold the yoke in half. Where when I put it on this yoke, each yoke will be different, how much at the top you're going to have left. So when I cut mine, and you cut it, and then I'll pin my yoke on it. So I've got it folded, and if this is my fabric, I would go ahead and pin the yoke on, and then I would go under or lay the yoke upon it before we pinned it on to measure where I'm going to cut out of the fabric. And then we'll turn that under, and we'll have to hem that. And then we'll baste our yoke on before we completely, look and see after we lay it out to see is there going to be any gathering that needs to happen up here to adjust for however it hangs on my neck and shoulders. Now, since we're cutting the fabric according to the yoke, it should be the yoke neck should be determining where it's going to set. So theoretically, we'll be cutting out around here, this spot here. So this is a smaller yoke, so a smaller amount of material will be being cut out. Now, when we get to the yokes that are straight across, that's going to be a gathering kind of situation and going to be sewn under the yoke with the sleeves. But this particular one is just the yoke and not the sleeves. So the sleeves are just going to be plain fabric, and we'll adjust those and hem those and see if we want to put any lace on the sleeves and all of that when we get to that point. So the next thing I need to do is take a look at my fabric. Remember, we're going on the fold here. So just this piece is just a little longer than what I'm going to be cutting anyway, so I'm just not going to bother to cut off the end. I want to get a good fold there, and you're going to have you want a double fold, obviously. Well, if you have a double fold, you're not going to be sewing any sleeve, any shoulder seams. If you have a single fold, shoulder seams. Well, let's see what happens if we put this one here. Oh, look at that! It's just perfect. Basically, this is the entire width of the gown without seams. All right, because this fabric came out perfect. If you don't have the fabric wide enough, you're going to have to. So I've got a fold at the top. I folded my fabric in half, and then I have a fold in the center. If you only have, if you're having to work with multiple pieces of fabric and you don't have enough to fold the top, you're just going to fold your fabric in half so you have the center seam you don't want to sew. So that's where your priority needs to be with this. If you have to sew, if you only have narrow pieces of fabric, you're going to have to prep your fabric to begin with. You're going to need to sew your fabric into a width that is going to be functional, and you will have more seams. So then you'll need to line your seams up, so make sure your seams are in the center. I mean, it can be done. It's not crazy or anything. So here we go. We're going to smooth out my fabric, and we determined mine was exactly perfect. So I'm going to cut the little neck hole up here. And that's all going to get cut away. We know that, but that just lets us orientate where we are. Now we want to just cut out this rectangle. Now if you wanted to, you could do a flare, like a flare cut to give yourself more room. the basic gown piece. You can see our center fold, so that gives us a good line. If your fabric doesn't have a fold, you can always iron a nice crease there, which makes it a lot easier as a guide while you're working with it. Okay, and using my top fold. If you don't have a top fold, you'll be using, if you don't have a top fold, you'll need to go ahead and sew your shoulder seam. So you just put the two together and sew your shoulder seam. So you have a full piece of fabric. So right now I'm just going to center, I'm going to find the halfway point of my yoke by folding over. Usually the design will show you where the shoulder center is going to be. So I'm going to fold that over on there, and then I'm going to fold it back. Pin this all around. Now if you wanted to at this point, you could actually do basting stitches. Pin it well. You don't want it to move or be able to, you know, throw off your inside cutting here. So more pins is better than too few there. Okay, and when you're cutting out this section here, we don't want to use our great big sewing scissors because we don't want to cut our yoke. And we need to remember that the fabric we sew under needs to align with this square. So I need to leave some to fold under. So I'm not going to cut it exactly under it. I'm just going to cut it around so I can remove this little bit. And whatever your yoke style is will change how much and the shape of what you're cutting out. Cut a little slant on here so I can fold it under easy. And like I said, you can, because where we cut the little neck hole, you have a little bit of a divot here. But that's okay, I don't mind. If that bothers you, you might not want to cut your neck hole out, but I find having the neck hole cut out to begin with gives you an orientation. Roll this under. And pin it. Because we're going to hem that part. I'm just leaving because when I go and hem that, I'm also going to hand stitch my yoke. Probably when I'm sewing it, I'll go over the yoke with the sewing machine, but to begin with, I'm going to hand stitch it in place. Now you start to see where the ribbon casing will be, you know, inside the neck there. So there is our neck hole. Let's turn it over and we'll look at that. Alright, so we can see right here, like on the little corners, that when I'm hand sewing, might as well just get it. So I will have to roll this and sew it when I get to that. In fact, I don't. So all these little edges are turned under. So let's see, let's do the hand sewing. Okay, the neck opening is hemmed, and I will go back over that with my sewing machine. I'm going to put in a few stitches here and there. Well, maybe I'll do all the way around. Let's see. I'm going to go all the way around my yoke. Inside of my yoke, and I think I'm going to use a zigzag. I'm going to be leaving this part. My yoke has a part to run a ribbon through, so I'm going to be leaving that off of at the top. I think that will look pretty with the ribbon up there. And I'm going to be sewing the inside of the yoke to the gown neck opening, and then I'm going to go around and sew the outside of the yoke. Try to keep my fabric as flat as possible as I'm doing all this here. And I want to make sure that I don't sew that ribbon casing by accident. And this is where I need to make sure I'm stretching it flat. As I sew. And it's also important to note that you should have pre-shrunk, washed your fabric and the yoke before you constructed this. That way when you wash them, you don't have uneven shrinkage. So far. Okay, so we have the yoke. Now, if you didn't like the fabric behind your yoke, on some yokes you could cut it away. On this yoke, I think it needs to be, because it has the place for the ribbon to go, I think it needs to be sewn flat beneath the ribbon. I guess you could cut it all the way down if you wanted to cut it down farther and, you know, take it like this, but I think that looks good the way it is. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to go slip it over my head, and I'm going to look at where the sleeves hit, and I wanted to decide where to hem my sleeves. And when we come back, we'll hem the sleeves, and then I'm going to sew the two side seams, and I'm going to be doing French seams that I'm seeing. So I'm just going, the sleeves were fine. I'm just going to hemming them both about a 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to pin it up here. And then I'm going to turn it over and top stitch it. Alright, get that one done. Now we're going to French seam the side seams. And so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pin it real quick, and then I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. So how do you French seam? So I've got it pinned. So the way you French seam is, first of all, you put it together like it would be if you were looking at it the right side, not inside out like you normally sew. I'm going to sew all the seams, and then I'm going to trim those seams as close as I can. Then I'm going to turn it inside out, and I'm going to sew the seams again. So all the seams are contained. There are no raw edges. It's going to make your gown last a lot longer. I'm sewing about 4 to 1/2 inch seam, straight stitch. Alright, now I want to cut a small diagonal here where the corner is in the underarm. And now I'm going to go lay this over here. I'm going to lay this over here. I'm going to trim the seam. I'm going to turn it inside out, and then I'm going to go iron it real quick. Ironed my seams, And now we're on the inside out part, and you can see there's the seam in there. I'm going to go ahead and do a seam here, and it's going to encase that seam that we had on the right side of the fabric to begin with within that seam. See, so here's the inside seam now. See, it's all encased. There's no raw edges. And there's the outside. So now I'm going to do my hem. And I think to make it faster, I'm just going to go and zigzag it, and then I'll flip it over once here. Top stitching is not necessary, but I think it makes your garment, whenever you top stitch something, I just think it makes the garment look. So here is our gown right now, and I'm going to put I have some ribbon. I have pink ribbon, which I think is what I'm going to use the pink ribbon in there. I'm going to feed that through the seam. So I'm going to sort of find the center. It's going to go in and out. I'm using, it's called double faced. So it's the same on both sides. Satin ribbon. And there is the finished gown. You see how pretty that looks. And the sleeves, very simple. Oh, look what I did. I put it on backwards. Oh man, I gotta undo it all. Okay, let me take two here. Okay, it took a few minutes and I had to redo my ribbons. I forgot about the yoke was pointed, so I had to redo those ribbons. This one was a print fabric. Some of them I'm going to do solid white, which is more traditional. The muslin was more traditional, just the plain. And we'll get to some solid white ones and we'll look at them when I get them done.